Hello, and welcome to this news event sponsored by the law firm Peiffer, Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway, or Peiffer Wolf for short. And you'll be hearing from 5 speakers today, and then we'll open the floor for questions during the Q&A period. The Q&A period will be for reporters only, and if you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function, and your line will be unmuted when it is your turn to ask a question. For more info, you can go to lostembryos.com. And in a couple of minutes, we're also going to send in the chat a direct link to the news release related to today's news event, so it's handy. So again, look for that in a minute in the chat window. As I mentioned, you'll be hearing from 5 speakers. First, attorney Adam Wolf, partner at Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. Second, Beverly Willhelm, San Diego mother in the case against the San Diego, California doctor. Third, James Mallas, son of Beverly Willhelm, also in San Diego. Fourth, Katherine Richards, the San Francisco area mother in the case against the Virginia and West Virginia doctor. And fifth, Julie Druyor, daughter of Katherine Richards, and Julie is in Dallas. So let's go ahead and start with our first speaker, attorney Adam Wolf, partner at Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. He's the leading U.S. attorney handling IVF, fertility, and genetic materials cases. He's handled hundreds of such cases involving over 1,000 people. And Adam Wolf also led the 2019 Peiffer Wolf push for tighter regulation over fertility clinics and fertility doctors. So please proceed, Adam.
Thank you, Max. Good morning. My name is Adam Wolf. I am a partner at the national law firm Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. I'm also the chair of our fertility and IVF misconduct practice. Thank you for joining us today for this news conference. Before I get started, I just want to begin by recognizing the courage of Katie Richards from San Francisco, her daughter, Julie Druyor from Dallas, Bev Willhelm of San Diego, and her son, Jimmy Mallas Jr., also of San Diego. Katie and Bev share something in common. In addition to being incredibly strong and brave, they are the victims of fertility fraud. What do I mean by that? These women trusted their doctors to do their job and be honest with them, to follow the clear directions they gave their doctors, and to use the sperm of an anonymous donor to achieve a pregnancy. Instead, Katie and Bev discovered that their doctors inserted their own sperm into them. The misconduct of their doctors, Michael Kicken and Philip Milgram, is horrific, monstrous, and disgusting. It is beyond the bounds of a civilized society. It cannot be, and it will not be tolerated. Upon learning the results of home DNA test kits, our clients discovered that their lives are not what they thought they were. And I want to recognize both the burden they will always carry and the fearlessness they're showing here today. Today, we're here to discuss a national wave of fertility fraud. The 2 cases Peiffer Wolf filed today against doctors on both coasts are the tip of the iceberg of hundreds of fertility fraud cases that will be exposed through home DNA kits like Ancestry.com and 23andMe. First, victims of fertility fraud need to know that they have recourse. And Peiffer Wolf is committed to holding fertility doctors and fertility clinics accountable for their actions. Second, we need to put an end to the Wild West days of the U.S. IVF fertility industry. As we've said before at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., it's time for transparency and regulatory oversight in an industry run amok, which I will address in a few minutes. Let's talk about the 2 cases being filed today. The first case involves a doctor who is still licensed to practice medicine in Virginia and West Virginia, Dr. Michael S. Kicken. Katie Richards, a San Francisco area woman, learned via home DNA testing that the biological father of her children was her fertility doctor, Dr. Michael Kicken. Dr. Kicken secretly utilized his own sperm in her fertility treatments. Kicken had assured Katie that the sperm to be used in her fertility treatment would be from a healthy and anonymous donor. Kicken's sperm was neither. In fact, Katie later learned that her daughter Julie had inherited from Kane a serious genetic condition, Tay-Sachs, a disease that can be passed on to future generations. Kane holds medical licenses in numerous states and is practiced in California, Pittsburgh, the greater Washington, D.C. area, Richmond, Virginia, Lynchburg, Virginia, and Martinsburg, West Virginia. The second lawsuit is being brought by Beverly Willhelm of San Diego. Her case involves the misconduct of Dr. Philip Milgram, who has a very troubling, checkered history of practice in California, New York, and Las Vegas. Bev and her then husband sought the help of Dr. Milgram in 1988 for artificial insemination, which resulted in the birth of their son. Although Milgram promised Bev that he would use the sperm of a healthy and anonymous sperm donor, he instead injected his own sperm into her. A since-admitted drug addict, Milgram later was stripped of his medical license in California and has faced accusations of practicing medicine while intoxicated, failing to maintain records, and a host of other offenses. Amazingly, he later regained his license and now practices what he calls addiction medicine in the San Diego area. He is also an attending physician at Scripps Memorial Hospital in La Jolla. The actions of these doctors is horrific. Let's be clear. This is the kind of gross misconduct and betrayal that we are uncovering thanks to home DNA test kits. These are the tests that people receive as holiday gifts. And it's horrible to realize that families across America may be just one Christmas gift away from learning an unexpected and deeply troubling result. These tests are about finding out who you are, who your family is, where you came from. It is appalling to think that families across America are taking these tests to connect with each other, only to discover that everything they have known about their identities and family histories is a lie. Here's the reality. The United States is on the brink of uncovering thousands of fertility fraud cases in which IVF or OBGYN doctors have abused their position of trust and authority by secretly using their own sperm and carrying out fertility treatments. Fertility fraud abuses by the rapidly growing number of medical professionals within the IVF fertility industry will not stop until we hold the perpetrators accountable and the US imposes tighter regulations. We have to decide as a nation that the Wild West days for the fertility IVF industry are over. That is why we are renewing the call today for federal regulation to rein in a profession run amok. In August 2019, Peiffer published a report calling on Congress to impose a system of tight and highly transparent regulatory oversight and fertility industry controls. In addition to identifying several glaring weaknesses and the lack of regulatory oversight of the IVF fertility centers in the United States, the Peiffer-Wolf report identified the much tougher government standards in the United Kingdom as an excellent model for this nation. Now, you're going to hear the stories of the families who are living through the horror of fertility fraud. That concludes my opening statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Again, that was attorney Adam Wolf, partner at Peiffer, Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. So let's proceed to our second speaker, Beverly Willhelm, a San Diego mother in the case against the California doctor. Go ahead, Beverly.
Good morning. My name is Beverly Willhelm, and I live in the San Diego area. It's hard to explain the shock, pain, and confusion I felt when I found out the person that I love dearly, my own son, is genetically related to the doctor who inserted his own sperm inside of me without my consent and against my wishes. That's why I'm here today. I want to make sure that no one else experiences the distress and confusion that my family and I are facing. And I want to make sure that Dr. Philip Milgram or any doctor like him never does this to anyone else ever again. Soon after my marriage, we were having trouble conceiving. I was just 20 years old when my then husband and I turned to Dr. Milgram. Dr. Milgram assured me that he could help. At 20, it was a struggle, but we paid the cost and went through the emotional and physical difficulty of fertility treatment. Over and over again, we were assured that everything was good and would be okay. Dr. Milgram told me that he would use the sperm of an anonymous donor, someone that I did not know, whose sperm had been used numerous times to create babies. He told me that the donor was in good physical and mental health. We were overjoyed when we found out I was pregnant. It was the best day in my life when we were blessed with the birth of my son, Jimmy. Only years later, I found out that Dr. Milgram had lied to me. Instead of using the sperm of an anonymous donor, like he had promised, he used his own sperm. Instead of using the sperm of a physically and mentally healthy individual, as he had promised, he used the sperm of a drug addict who had serious mental health issues, his own sperm. Instead of telling me the truth, he lied. Jimmy, my little boy, is also traumatized. He is experiencing significant emotional distress and confusion about his identity. He is now forever linked to a biological sperm donor who violated his own mother. Dr. Milgram violated my trust, he violated his duties, and he violated me. Jimmy is my son, and I love him dearly, and nothing will ever change that. But no mother and no family should experience this. I have learned, unfortunately, that we are not alone in suffering at the hands of rogue fertility doctors. Our story is just one example of many similar tragedies, and that infuriates me. Dr. Milgram needs to pay for what he did to us, and we need to send a message to every other medical predator out there like him. That's my statement, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Beverly. Again, that was Beverly Willhelm. And we're going to go to our third speaker, James Mallas, also of San Diego, son of Beverly Willhelm. Go ahead, James.
Thank you. It's incredibly difficult for me to sit here and listen to my mom talk about this. It's heartbreaking, confusing, and infuriating. It's all because of what Dr. Milgram did to my mother. Sometimes I feel lost because there's nothing I can do to change what he did. But that's when I remember why I'm sitting here today. Dr. Milgram needs to pay for what he's done, and we need to expose the fertility fraudsters out there who are just like him. On a personal level, it's been a whole lot. I know who my mother is, and she will always be my mother. But now I know that Dr. Milgram lied to convince us that my father was an anonymous sperm donor. Now I have to somehow process and accept that my mother's abuser is my biological father. This is nearly impossible to process. What Dr. Milgram did is disgusting. It turns my stomach. And to think that he did that to my own mother makes it nearly unbearable. I also have to think about what I've inherited, literally, in this process. We know that Dr. Milgram was abusing drugs during the time period when he violated my mother. Is that part of who I am? Am I predisposed to drug abuse and addiction like Dr. Milgram? Dr. Milgram is a predator. Does that lie somewhere in my genes? This is a terrible thing to live with, all of it. What he did to my mother, what he did to my family, what he did to who knows how many others, and what he did to me. All of this has been a part of my life ever since we found out the results of my DNA test. And now it will forever be a part of my life. I'm forever connected to my mother's abuser. I expected to learn something new and exciting about who I am when I took this test. But instead, I learned something that's revolting. But I worry more about my mother than I do myself. Now that I've had time to sit with this, it makes me question everything. How can someone like this, someone who has a storied history of misdeeds, go on practicing medicine for so long? How in the world was Dr. Milgram readmitted to practice medicine in California after losing his license? Who was looking out for my mother? Who was looking out for all of the mothers? Not only do I want answers to these questions, but most of all, I want justice for my mother and for our family. I want to expose anyone else out there who also did this and who is now praying that more people like me do not take a home DNA test. That's the end of my statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Again, that was James Mallas, son of Beverly Willhelm. That takes us to our fourth speaker, Katherine Richards, a San Francisco area mother in the case against the doctor who practiced in Virginia and West Virginia. Go ahead, Katherine.
Good morning. My name is Katherine Richards, and I live in Livermore, California, which is just outside of San Francisco. My family has been victimized repeatedly by Dr. Michael Kicken, who apparently is now practicing medicine in Virginia and West Virginia, although he was in California when I was his patient. I'm very concerned for the people who still might be receiving care from this man. Dr. Kicken violated both my family and myself personally. This all dates back to when my husband and I were newlyweds and trying to conceive a child. We were unable to due to certain fertility issues and were referred to Dr. Kicken as the man who might be able to help us. He was then practicing in the Bay Area of California. When we went to Dr. Kicken, we were told that he probably would be able to help us, put us through lots of testing, and ultimately presented us with the decision of using artificial insemination. He assured us that the donor would be anonymous, that the donor would be in the medical profession, that the donor would be vetted medically and would be deemed as completely healthy and just fine. We were very happy when a short time later I got pregnant. In 1980, my wonderful daughter Julie was born. I said that Dr. Kicken repeatedly violated my family, and he did when my husband and I decided we wanted a second child, and we requested that we use the same donor the second time. What happened then was the birth of my terrific son and technical advisor. These two births, of course, were among the most amazing and incredible moments of my life. Unfortunately, when we found out about Dr. Kicken, he has now tarnished those memories for me. He secretly used his own sperm. Now I have to know that he violated me and that my children, whom I love dearly, are the result of his disgusting conduct. All of our memories and all of the memories that we have yet to make are forever tainted. I could never have imagined that I would be sitting here today. It's unthinkable. How could someone do this in good conscience? How could they dare abuse the trust that we placed in him? Dr. Kicken assured us that the donors would be anonymous, screened for serious diseases, and similar in physical and other backgrounds to my husband and more. On every single one of these points, every single thing that we were told, Dr. Kicken lied to us. He violated our trust, he crushed our faith, and he did the unthinkable to me. In fact, the medical screening that we were promised would have eliminated the possibility of my daughter being a Tay-Sachs carrier, but she is. This is just one of the many horrific consequences of what Dr. Kicken did. When we got back the 23andMe test results, we were stunned to see a background that made no sense based on what we were told. When we got those results for my daughter, we tested my son and found he shared the same biological father, as much as I hate calling him that. Adding to this horror, we found out that Dr. Kicken did this to at least one other woman who lived minutes away from us. And my children shared the same circle of friends with this woman's child. What could have happened here makes me ill just to think of it. Dr. Kicken refused to communicate with us, even before we came to understand that he was the sperm donor who violated me. This is the same callous and hurtful behavior that led to the deception in the first place, and the second time. How many others out there are just now learning of more abuses by Dr. Kicken and other doctors like him? How many others are just one Christmas DNA kit away from having their lives forever changed? It is no longer if, but when Dr. Kicken and anyone else like him are going to face the reckoning. That should happen now so that this never happens again to anyone else. Thank you. This concludes my statement.
Thank you. And again, that was Katherine Richards. And that takes us to our fifth and final speaker today, Julie Druyor, daughter of Katherine Richards. Julie?
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody who's spoken before me. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of conviction to be up here saying what you're saying in front of everyone. So I appreciate you and I applaud you all. It's difficult to even know where to start. I used to look in the mirror and I would recognize who was looking back at me. And now sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't even recognize myself. Sometimes I see him. Sometimes I see the man who violated my mother's trust and turned our world upside down. I'm a product of my mother's abuser. I don't know if I'll ever come to terms with that. Yes, there was nothing in this world that my mom wanted more than to be a mother, and she's the best mother in the world. She's my mom. But my mom never consented to her doctor secretly using his own sperm to violate her. And although I can't imagine a world without my brother, who I love dearly, no one should have to find out that they're the product of a predator. My brother and I will forever be linked to the man who did the unthinkable to our mom. This feeling of a stranger who violated my mother literally being a part of me is deeply disturbing. How do you deal with that? How do you feel comfortable knowing that? Maybe you never do. And now I have to deal with the fact that I passed down his genes. Am I going to see him in my children? I hate that I even have to think about that. No one agreed to this. No one wanted this. And now a part of him will forever live in me and my children. Dr. Kicken's decision to violate my mother will now live on for generations. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm disgusted. I'm confused. And sometimes I feel completely powerless, but not all the time. Today, our family is taking back the power. Today, Dr. Kicken will begin to feel the full weight of his actions, and his deceitful conduct will have dramatic consequences. I don't want to be biologically linked to someone who could do what he did to my mom and probably others, but I am. My life has been forever changed by this doctor. He needs to be brought to justice, and everyone like him who has ever done anything like this needs to be held accountable. That's the end of my statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Again, that was Julie Druyor, daughter of Katherine Richards. That takes us to the Q&A portion of the call. And just as a reminder, it's for reporters only. If you wish to ask a question, you can use the raise your hand function and your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to ask a question. If you're having any issues with your own audio or the raise your hand function, you can also use the text-based Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen there, and we'll do our best to get to all the questions. And very quickly, I want to mention that a video recording of this news event is going to be available online later today at lostembryos.com, where you can find more information. Again, that's lostembryos.com, no spaces. Okay. So it looks like our first question is from Elaine Povich at State Line. And we are unmuting you, Elaine. So you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. My question is, why now? There have been a lot of these cases around the country, some of which you have prosecuted, sir, and I'm curious if something has happened or why is this happening now? And if there's anything that you've heard from either of these two doctors, have there been any filings or any responses or any rebuttals?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Lane. I appreciate it. We have been contacted by people across the country over the last year or so who have, suffered in a similar way to the families we have here today. Those doctors were willing to resolve their cases. They did resolve their cases, and we haven't needed to prosecute them. In fact, these are the very first two cases that we have needed to file lawsuits over like this. The doctors decided that they want to take their chance in court, and that's okay. They can take their chance in court, but there are consequences for that. And so now when they, I think people need to know who they're dealing with when they're speaking with Dr. Kicken. They need to know who they're dealing with when they speak with Dr. Milgram. They need to know that this is the type of person they are talking to, the type of person who would say, I am using an anonymous sperm donor, and then secretly and intentionally decide to use his own sperm.
Okay. Let's go to our next question. Christy Smith, NBC Bay Area. Christy, we're enabling your audio, so go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you very much. The question, Katherine had mentioned, I believe her daughter was born in 1980 and that the doctor was practicing in the Bay Area. Do you know, I'm in San Francisco, like specifically where he was practicing at that time? And then, although it does sound deceitful, what is the rule that is actually being broken here? Is there a law that is being broken?
Katie, why don't you answer the first part of it and I'll answer the second.
Okay. I met Dr. Kicken at Alamo Medical Center in Alamo, which is just south of Walnut Creek, California. He was an OBGYN, and my regular general physician referred my husband and I to him when we were having difficulty getting pregnant.
Thanks, Katie. And then the second part of the question is, what laws does this break? And we have brought civil claims against these doctors for violating a host of laws and for violating our clients, excuse me. It runs from breach of contract to battery to fraud to misrepresentation. I think we could all agree that this is not okay. And our complaint lays out why legally they have violated the law.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Well, let's go to our next question. It's from Natalie Solis, Fox News in Dallas. And Natalie, we're enabling your audio.
Hi there.
Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. My question is for Julie. Julie, your mom touched on you taking the 23andMe test, but can you speak more specifically to that and how you were able to put these pieces together?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So I received a 23andMe test kit as a gift and decided it might be interesting to find out more about my heritage, and took the test, got the results, and found out that I was connected to a half brother, and found out that I was 50% Jewish. And to my mom and my dad's knowledge, neither one of them were Jewish. And to come back that I was 50% Jewish and that I had a half brother that I never knew about made me start to question things. I got connected with a genealogist who was able to go through some things, make some connections in some trees, things like that, and was able to make the connection to Michael Kicken. And as that's happened, there's just been more and more people who have come on Ancestry and 23andMe that have synced up and linked in to that tree to affirm more and more that Kicken is the donor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is going to come from Lindsay Pena, 10 News, San Diego. Okay, Lindsay, go ahead.
Okay. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This question is going to be, I guess, for Adam. The physician in Beverly's case, as far as we understand, is still practicing here in the San Diego area. Since this is a civil suit, would there ever be an instance where, as a result of this lawsuit, that he is stopped from practicing or his medical license is taken away in any way?
Sure. Thanks for asking your question, Lindsay. I appreciate it. Our claims, as you note, are civil claims. These are claims directly against the doctor. Outside of our purview are regulatory issues, whether he gets to keep his license. Outside of our domain is whether he is prosecuted criminally. That's not really for us to decide. We have filed civil claims, and then I guess it's up to the public to decide, do they want to go to a doctor like Dr. Milgram? Do they want to go to a doctor like Dr. Kicken? Do you want to be friends with these type of people? Do you want to talk to these people? Do you want to sit in church or temple next to this type of person? That's for the public to decide. Our claims are just civil claims. What is very clear here are that these doctors violated the law, they violated medical ethics, and most importantly, they violated their patients.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you.
Great. Let's go to our next question. It's from Amy Klein. She's a book author, and she wrote The Trying Game. Amy?
I had a couple of questions. One was, there was an article in 1987 that said that in 1987 that said 2% of doctors inseminated their patients with their own sperm, which is very high. But do you know what the prevalence of like that is today?
Thanks, Amy. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the writing you do on it. That's a shocking statistic. I have not heard that. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if in what percentage of those cases people knew that their doctor was doing that.
No, it was 2% it was in the Atlantic article talking about when this became illegal.
Got it. I don't know the percentages. What I do know is that we have received calls from people around the country who have suffered in similar fashion. So while thankfully this is a very uncommon practice, unfortunately it has happened, and it's happened all over the country. We hear from people all the time who have suffered like this. We try to help them out as we can. What we'd like to hear from a doctor is, you know what? I did it. I'm really sorry. And nothing will ever make this okay. Nothing will ever make it right. But what can I do? Okay. That's not what we heard here. And that's why we needed to file these cases.
Okay. And my question, I do a lot of reporting for Jewish publications as well. And I just wonder if Julie, if she'd be interested in talking about what uncovering a Jewish father, I guess, if that impacts her religion or identity, if she'd be interested in talking about that for a story.
I thank you for asking that. I have no ill feelings towards finding out about my Jewish heritage. That piece I was actually very excited to learn about. I've learned to understand a bit of the heritage, the culture, the norms, and that part I think is exciting. I wish it hadn't come from the doctor. If it had been an anonymous sperm donor who had been Jewish, I think I could have embraced that religion a little bit more, and more of the traditions and more of the culture and the heritage. It is tainted because of where it came from and how it came to be. But it's something that I'm still working on, trying to figure out how that gets incorporated into my identity. I've been a devout Christian my entire life. I identify as a child of Christ. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can identify and incorporate, or do I want to, or how do I, this newfound biological heritage into my identity.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will be from Anna Miller at Business Insider.
Hi, can you hear me?
Anna, go ahead. Yes.
Great. Well, thank you all for speaking. You're very poised, and it's a very difficult subject, obviously, and personal, so I appreciate it. My question is to both Jimmy and Julie. I'd like to, I'm sorry if you've already said this, but hear when exactly you did piece these pieces together, and then what has helped you cope with this reality most?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So I received a 23andMe DNA test for Christmas, and I was very excited for it, because I didn't know much about my father's side. And I as well actually found out that I am 50% Ashkenazi Jewish from that. And really, after getting that, I found out I had a half sister in New York State, and kind of putting the pieces together, we found out that Dr. Milgram was practicing at the same time in the same area, and it kind of just blew up from there.
Yeah, and I had, similar to Jimmy's story, I also received a 23andMe test kit for Christmas. And I didn't know much about my family background. We have, my grandfather was adopted, so we thought this might be a great way for me to kind of plug some holes and figure some things out. And when I took the test, I took it about actually it'll be a year coming up shortly here that I got the results of my DNA test. And it showed that I was 50% Jewish, which neither of my parents were 100% Jewish, also Ashkenazi Jew. It showed a half brother that I'd never known about my entire life. And by putting those two things together, and then with the help of a genealogist, we were able to connect on the tree that it had to have been Dr. Kicken who used his own sperm to impregnate my mom fraudulently.
And can you speak at all to anything that has helped you deal with this?
I've personally found a lot of help in my faith in talking with other individuals who have prayed with me and prayed over me and prayed with me through this. I've joined a couple of Facebook groups for other people who are in the same situation that I'm in, and talking and sharing my story with other people and listening to other people share their stories has given me an immense comfort. Also my family and some of my friends who know have helped a lot.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And our next question comes from Winston Cho at the Daily Journal.
Hi, appreciate you taking my questions here. This is for Adam. You referred to some settlements that you reached with doctors who have been accused of similar misconduct. Is there any duty to report those civil settlements to whatever entity is responsible for licensing these doctors?
I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of any duty to do that. And there's confidentiality over those agreements, so I really can't say any more about it. What I could say is that we are unfortunately in this place right now. I wish we didn't need to be here. I wish we could have resolved this. Unfortunately, this is where we are. And maybe one of the very few good things that comes out of it is that we start a conversation about this, is that we're having this conversation right now, is that we understand that this can happen and that we do need regulatory controls to ensure that these types of things never happen again. How is this allowed to happen? Because there's very little oversight. There's nobody looking behind the door. There's nobody who sees. There's nobody who double checks. There are no standards in place. And so we have to resort to filing a case like this and having a conversation about it. And hopefully this conversation leads to more conversations, leads to regulation, leads to this not happening ever again.
Thank you. And before we take some follow-ups, just want to remind reporters, if they want to ask an original question, that if you do wish to ask a question, to just use the raise your hand function, and we'll unmute you when it's your turn. And as a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you have any issues with your audio whatsoever, you can use that text-based Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there, and we'll do our best to get to those questions one way or another. Okay, Christy Smith at NBC San Francisco. Go ahead with your follow-up question.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry if you addressed this earlier. This question is for Adam, but the families use 23andMe. Are you looking for other families who may be in this same situation that they are? Right now we have these two, and you may have addressed this earlier, but are you looking for other families?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. I appreciate the question. You know, we field calls all the time from people who have suffered like this, and we're going to continue to field calls like this. We want to help people who are in this position. We want to make sure that there is justice done for them. We want to make sure that the doctors who perpetrate this kind of, who perpetrate these activities, who engage in these activities, understand now that it's wrong and that they can't do this again. So yes, we are looking for other people to come forward. We do need to have a conversation about it, and we'd be happy to help anybody else who has suffered like this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And it looks like we're showing no further questions at the moment. You want to make sure you know where to get more information, though, following today's news event. If you need to connect with any of the speakers you've heard from today or get information, you can contact Max Carlin, 703-276-3255. I mentioned this before. There will be an audio or a video recording, of this news event and also related media materials, all available online at lostembryos.com. That's lostembryos, no spaces.com. As well, we've got some photos of the defendants and the plaintiffs that will be made available to media. And if you're interested in any of that, you can also contact Max Carlin about it. Check one more time for questions. We do have one follow-up from Christy Smith again, NBC San Francisco. Christy, go ahead and unmute you.
Sorry to keep asking you so many questions. I'm not sure if it's Adam or someone else, but do you have someone in your office that might speak Spanish?
Yeah, Christy, thank you for that. If you touch base with Max after this, we'd be happy to try to help you out with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. Okay, well, again, Max Carlin is the contact if you need anything following this news event, 703-276-3255, or you may see some emails from him in your inbox. We do thank you for joining this news event sponsored by the law firm Peiffer, Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. And that concludes today's news event. We thank you all. Bye-bye.